1.1 Ideals of Democracy. So this is like the basis of how we got to the government that we have today. So first, we're going to be talking about the influence of Enlightenment thought. If you took AP World, then this might sound a little familiar to you. So we're going to start with Thomas Hobbes and the Leviathan. In that, he argued that humans live in a state of nature rather than a governed state, which results in anarchy and war, and his remedy was people need to give up some of their rights to agree to live in peace. And an absolute sovereign would hold society together, but still honor a social contract. That was his sort of solution. Now, John Locke argued about natural law. He said that natural law is like the law of God and that this law is acknowledged through human sense and reason. So people were born to be free and equal, and they were entitled to and even obligated to rebel when a king's rules did not respect the consent of the governed. Now, Jean-Jacques Rousseau had the social contract. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, he had the social contract. He was influenced heavily by Locke, and he was like, everybody needs to kind of give up a certain natural rights in order to live peacefully in a secure society. So he was thinking of this popular sovereignty, which is where the people act as this ultimate ruling authority. So you would need a government of officials to carry out these laws that like the people have kind of submitted to and agreed to of their own accord in some way. Baron de Montesquieu and the Spirit of Laws is next. His big thing was like the argument for like a separation of powers. So that's kind of where we draw our executive, legislative, and judicial branches. So this Enlightenment thought and this style of thought in which like people kind of deserve their own rights and they have these like entitled rights being the basis of a lot of this, ended up, spreading and people started thinking of it more and more, and it kind of worked its way into our government and our revolution. So the kind of key phrase for the American Revolution was life, liberty, and property, and so this political ideology of republicanism arose, and this is where people will elect their leaders, and the leaders have to make and execute these laws in the public interest, and this is all for a limited period of time, so you have that turnover, and people are constantly getting like a sort of say because they're making it for the people's interests. United States is a limited government, so it's kept under control by laws, checks and balances, separations of powers. It's limited in each like branch and each person what they can do. Now we're on to declaring independence. I wonder what document you'll have to know. So when America was colonies, they were kind of getting antsy with the British, and they were like, no taxation without representation, am I right? And they were like, you're right. Not British, the people in the colonies. So the British then sent more military forces, and things just got more and more, tensions kept on rising. So 5 men gathered: Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and 2 other guys that names aren't bolded. And they were like, Declaration of Independence. We're gonna write it because this is how we're feeling, and you need to know this because, like, we need a voice, and this is how we're gonna make it. This was basically like, here is the why of why we're rebelling. This is like why it's justified. And its ideas drew heavily from those Enlightenment thoughts. So, Revolutionary War, that's where America gained its independence. And under the Articles of Confederation, which we'll talk more about later, these like new states created this kind of first constitution, Articles of Confederation. Now, the U.S. Constitution, a blueprint for government. So the Articles of Confederations was this like decentralized federal government thing, and they were like, this isn't quite working, so they called a convention. The Confederation Congress called a convention in Philadelphia, and they were like, we gotta revise this because we want something that works. James Madison, his name is bolded here, he was like very influential in shaping the Constitution. He has the nickname Father of the Constitution. So he very much supported this Constitution, very, very pro. George Washington was elected president of the convention. Alexander Hamilton was also very important. States were also sending representatives here as well. And so the Grand Committee was formed, and it was made up of one delegate from each of the states who are represented. This becomes important when they're trying to agree and make compromises, which we'll see in later parts of this book. And this Constitution, again, followed very Enlightenment ideals. So they had a strong executive, like Hobbes was saying, although they don't have absolute power. And so we have a president, head of the executive branch, whom we elect. They also believed in the social contract thing from Locke and Rousseau. And we have our three separate branches, the separation of powers like Montesquieu. The highlighted big idea in this chapter is that the U.S. Constitution establishes a system of checks and balances among branches of government and allocates power between federal and state governments. This system is based on the rule of law and the balance between majority rule and minority rights. Majority rule, minority rights gets discussed much later. So do checks and balances. So do federal and state governments. This thing is basically sets you up for the rest of the book. This is our Constitution. This is the law. That's your government. AP US government. So we have separation of powers, legislative, executive, and judicial, and they can all check each other, checks and balances. And this is a representative republic. So it's a collection of sovereign states gathered for the national interests, national needs, and national defense. That was straight from the book, but basically that means that there's a bunch of states, there's a bunch of people, and states each have their own, but they'll come together underneath this representative republic where they are represented, and it comes together for the good of us all and for everyone's protection and interest. And to promote this idea, we have popular elections every so often. With the writing of the Constitution, that was 2 years for members of the House of Representatives, and then there were later amendments for the rest of the stuff. Thank you for watching. I hope this helped. I hope you learned, reviewed. And if this did, I will be putting out more videos just like these for the rest of the chapters.